The recording has started. So again, welcome. We're going to discuss the CBCG Competitive Capacity Building Grant, which is a state grant program. And then we will discuss SLCGP, State Local Cybersecurity Grant Program, which is our new cybersecurity grant program, federal grant received from FEMA. To kick it off, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And you can see the slides. We're coming to you live today from Wilmington, North Carolina, at Cape Fear Community College. All right, let me try to make this a little bigger.
On the slide deck.
Okay, so by way of introduction, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself, and then we'll have everybody, my staff, introduce themselves, and then we'll have everybody online introduce themselves as well. So my name is Derek DeRozio. I'm the compliance officer, grants branch manager at North Carolina Emergency Management. I have been with NCM since 2021 as a compliance officer. I'm responsible for our portfolio of grants at NCM that exceeds about $500 million a year. We've got 20 major recurring federal and state grant programs, both disaster and non-disaster, across the organization, across all 8 sections of NCM. I'm responsible for compliance of all those grant programs. Of those 20 programs that we have, 20 major programs, we have other smaller grant programs. Of those 20 major programs that we have, 10 of those are preparedness non-disaster grants that the grants management branch is responsible for managing. So I also lead the grants management branch, or GMB, as we manage those 10 major grant programs. Those grant programs total about $85 million a year. So overall, NCEM has a portfolio of about $500 million a year across all our 20 major grant programs. And of that $500 million, about $85 million is the 10 grants management branch managed non-disaster preparedness grant programs, including CBCG and SLCGP. So if you look at the numbers and the math, you can obviously see $500 million total portfolio, $85 million of which are the preparedness non-disaster grants. The big money, if you will, is in disaster grants, primary public assistance and hazard mitigation. However, we manage the most number of grants. We manage over 10 to 20 grants. We have hundreds of recipients for those grant programs across the state. So we stay pretty busy with these various grant programs, including CBCG and SLCGP. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my staff, and then we'll go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves in the audience. When you introduce yourself, please just say your name, your organization, what your role is, what your experience with grants are, and if you have any particular questions or issues that you'd like to be addressed today. So we'll start with the staff, and Lisa, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Patton. I am the most senior grants manager on the team, and I'm considered the subject matter expert in the Homeland Security Grant, the State and Local Cybersecurity Grant, and the HMEP and Tier 2 grants from the USDOT. We'll be talking a little bit later this afternoon about the SLCGP grant. Look forward to taking any questions from you guys. I've been with NCM for 10 years with the grants team. Was 2 before that with public assistance team, and love my job, love my team, and we make every effort to make your jobs a little bit easier in the grant processing and cycle. So if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to reach out.
Lisa.
Good morning. My name is Janine Childs. I have been with the grants team almost 2 years now. I have over 10 years of experience with grants, with EPA style grants, CDC. I'm the subject matter expert for the capacity building competitive grant program and the emergency management preparedness grant. I work with the Eastern branch and help manage all the grants for the branch there. So really excited. CBCG is growing, and my team is awesome. So thank you all for joining, and please reach out. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand or put them in chat, and we will make sure that we acknowledge that. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Janine. Michelle?
Oh, can I be heard?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Michelle Strong. I've been with the team for about a year now. I manage the central branch grants. Prior to this, I worked predominantly with HUD grants in the nonprofit field, and I'm excited to be here.
Brad?
Hello, my name is Brian Garrett. I've been with this team now for a little over 2 years. Primarily, I handle the nonprofit grants, nonprofit security grant, GCC, 211, and BOAD. My experience with grants started back 2000 during the pandemic. Glad to be here.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. So now we're gonna get to the audience introductions. So, give me a second, we'll go around the room. All right, so, I'm gonna go right down our list of participants, and I don't know who the external caller is, the 704-305-1418 number. But whoever that is, if you could please introduce yourself, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, hello, good morning. My name is Will Jenrette. I'm the cybersecurity engineer here over at the City of Concord. I've been here for about 6 years now. So anyway, just want to say good morning and thanks for the setting this all up.
Thanks, Will, appreciate it. Anything in particular you want to learn this morning, or any questions you have in particular you want to be addressed?
Nothing at the moment. I think we're just looking at trying to find more information in regards to the grant process, and also for future preparation for us to make sure we get everything that you need, and to see if there's any other additional grants that potentially could be available to us here in the cybersecurity world, and go from there.
Thank you, Will. Well, you're in the right place, because this program is intended for actual sub-recipients of the SLCGP and CBCG grants. So you're in the right place, and we'll certainly get that information for you. Thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you.
And the next phone number is 910-409-0939.
Hi, this is Eileen Hennessy. I do the IT for the city of Southport, and we just got in on the cybersecurity grant, and I'm trying to figure out what we need to do and how we're going to use that.
All right, Eileen. Well, again, you're in the right place, and welcome. We will be getting the cybersecurity grant here shortly, so please bear with us. Thank you. All right, Ryan Allgood. Ryan, please introduce yourself.
I'm Brian Allgood. I'm the county manager in Beaufort County. We're a sub-recipient of the cybersecurity grant.
All right, very good, Ryan. Thanks for being here. Carl Woody.
I'm Carl Woody with the town of Manio. We did receive the cybersecurity grant, so we're just looking at more information on how to process that grant, get reimbursements, and all that other good stuff.
Perfect. You're in the right place, sir. Glad you're here. Conrad Singh.
Hi, yeah, Conrad Sane, work for the town of Apex, security and compliance analyst. Been doing this for about a year and a half. Just generally looking for some more information on SLCGP and, making sure we do everything right, making sure that we get the reimbursements and all that, and give you what you need.
All right, we'll definitely cover that, Conrad. Thanks for being here. We have a couple other NCM employees. James Collins. James, want to introduce yourself?
Yes, James Collins. I'm one of the multi-hazard field planners out of the central branch office, basically covering from the northern part of I-77 out to I-95 around Johnston County.
All right, James, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Shonda Corbett, introduce yourself, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shonda Corbett. I am the Western Branch Supervisor for Public Assistance for the state of North Carolina. And I'm glad to be in the room with some good minds. Thank you.
Thanks, Shonda. We appreciate it. And as I mentioned earlier, that's one of our disaster grant programs that Shonda works on, public assistance. So very, very highest large dollar program that we have. So we're glad Shonda's here with us as well. Kind of cross train and learn a little about our grants. Eileen Hennessy, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I already went. I'm called in.
Oh, sorry. You double dipped it. Sorry. Sorry about that.
Thanks.
All right. John Royal, please introduce yourself.
John Royal, Emergency Manager Coordinator for Chatham County.
Oh, John, hey, I'm reviewing from yesterday. Welcome. And John, refresh my memory, you have CBCG and SLCGP?
CBCG.
Just CBCG, okay. right, well, welcome back, John. Appreciate you joining us virtually. Kevin Kerr, please introduce yourself, sir.
Hey, good morning, Kevin Turner, City of Burleson Emergency Management. We've got SLCGP, so just kind of echoing what everybody else has said, but looking forward to learning some on the CBCG side too.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And looks like we have Will. Did you already introduce yourself? Will?
Yeah, that was me at the beginning as well.
Perfect. All right. Is there anybody else online that we missed?
Garrett, can we pause 1 second? I had to admit 3 people
Okay.
who registered,
Yes.
and I just sent them the link.
Okay, please stand by. Take a little pause. Okay, folks, so we have a few more folks who are gonna join us. And looking at, the reason we do the introductions, looking at who we have here, primarily an SLCGP crowd. We're gonna go ahead and we're still gonna cover CBCG first this morning, but we're gonna kind of expedite that a little bit. We'll spend about maybe 15 minutes or so on CBCG, and then we'll get right into SLCGP, which is what most folks are here for. But we have plenty of time for any questions that y'all have about any of our grant programs, but these two in particular, as Janine mentioned, at any time, raise your virtual hand, pop your question in chat, or we'll also take pauses for questions. Janine?
Do we need to do an audio test? John, can you hear us? John Royal?
We lost audio. Yeah.
Can everyone else hear us?
Give us a thumbs up if you can hear us.
Hand raised, Shonda's raised.
No.
Oh, it's just to confirm. Gotcha.
Okay, we're good.
I can hear you.
All right, perfect. All right. So while Janine's letting in the other few folks, when we bring up our slides again, we'll kind of get on through CBCG, get the SLCGP. Right. Okay. So again, I kind of already covered the information on this slide. So again, but the other non-disaster preparedness grants that the grant management branch covers, in addition to SLCGP and CBCG, HSGP, EMPG, NSGP, HMDP, EOCGP, Tier 2, NC201, and ROAC. That's the alphabet soup of different grants. Point being, we've had or are having specific training on all these different grant programs. It's all part of our GYGO series. Today we covered SLCGP and CBCG. By way of just general introduction, pretty much for any of our grant programs and really all federal grant and state programs that are managed through NCEM, there's a standard grant life cycle that pretty much every grant follows. It all starts with a notice of funding opportunity or a NOFA. So it's a federal grant. The federal government, in our case, usually it's DHS or DHS/FEMA. We do have some grants through DOT/PHMSA, but for the most part, DOT/FEMA will publish a notice of funding opportunity. They're typically very long documents. They can be like 100 pages long. Once we see the NOFA, we read through that, and then we as NCM apply for the award on behalf of the state. So can everyone please mute their mics if you're not talking? There's the background noise. But with the NOFA published, we submit an application on behalf of the state. We secure the state award, and then we pass that through to y'all. So with a federal award, we as NCM, represent the state. We secure the funding for the state. we pass that through to the sub-recipients, the local government entities, counties, and so forth. So we be considered the recipient of the federal award. Y'all will be the sub-recipients of the federal award. The state grant, it's a little different. We directly are the grantor of the state grant. So because we represent the state of North Carolina, so we're the grantor. We take that money from the appropriation that the legislature provides. For example, CBCG being a state grant, we take that money, we're the grantor, we directly grant it to you as the recipient of the state grant. So it can get a little confusing, sub-recipients, recipients, like the federal state grant. So we just refer to y'all as grantees, right? You get a grant from or through us, you're considered a grantee, just to make it simpler. So that's the first step in the cycle was the NOFO and the state award, or the appropriation. Then we go ahead and we solicit applications from our grantees, from y'all. So we'll typically publish those on our website. We'll get those out through various channels and communicated. Y'all have successfully applied for a CBCG and or SLCGP, or various other grant programs and receive other grants. So you go complete those applications. We then have a, typically it's a committee review process that reviews and kind of ranks and scores those applications. And we just had training on competitive grant applications yesterday here at the NCMA conference in Wilmington. But basically, with a competitive grant program such as CBCG and SLCGP, not everybody who seeks to receive funding, through us is successful. There's unfortunately a limited amount of dollars, and there's usually more need than there are dollars to provide. So that application process will be all very important to hopefully secure funding for you. If you don't get funding in a particular year, we certainly would encourage you to apply again in the future and keep trying. So that's the application phase is after the NOFO. Then for those that receive funding, you'll receive an award letter, an award notification. And then in that award notification, at least with us, we'll ask you, we'll say, congratulations, you received an award. Sometimes that award will be the full amount that you asked for, and sometimes it may be a partial amount, right? You might have everything you asked for. You might ask for $100,000 and only get $80,000. In that case, we'll tell you, hey, you only got $80,000. We'll ask you to submit an amended budget or an amended scope of, and or an amended scope of work so that your projects you submitted will meet the dollar amount award. But then that's in the award notification. The award notification, you tell us who you want to sign your MOA or your grant agreement. But once we get those signatories from you, we go ahead and issue your grant agreement to you. We call it MOA, Memorandum of Understanding. That specifies the award amount, the approved project, scope of work, which typically your application with any amendments, and the period of performance of the POP during which you have to complete your expenditures for the grant. So that's the legal document, legal contract, probably the most important document you're going to receive in the grant life cycle. So at this phase, if you're all CBCG or SLCGP grantees, at least for 22 SLCGP and 23 CBCG, you've already received your award notification or award letter and your MOA. So you should have all that already by now. And then as you go through and actually start performing under the grant, you will submit requests for reimbursement. Sometimes we call them cost reports, depending on the type of grant. But basically, it's a request for reimbursement whereby you incur eligible expenditures under the grant related to the approved scope of work, the project that you applied for or approved for. You submit eligible expenditures, and then you submit a request for reimbursement, and we then go ahead and pay you. So all of our grants are reimbursement-based grants. So you have to go ahead and kind of front the money yourselves first, incur those expenditures, complete payment for those items or services, then submit the reimbursement request to us, and we reimburse you. So that's the next phase. Along with that phase is sort of the management of the grant cycle. There are also various reporting requirements, which do vary by grant. You also submit reports on a periodic basis to us, kind of let us know, what you're doing with the money. And then once the period of performance is over, hopefully you've expended all your funds. There's a closeout process where there's certain documentation you have to submit to us to close your grant out. Once we receive that documentation, we may or may not do a site visit. It's up to us to do that. We have to order a site visit. We always reserve the right to do that. We don't do those often unless there's a need usually, but it can be done at any time. In any event, whether you have a site visit or not, once you submit that documentation to us, we review it and we decide it's all good to go to close you out. We will issue a single page letter, kind of a receipt showing that that grant is closed out and you are done with your obligations under the grant. That letter is very important when you receive it. You put that in your grant file. And in case you ever get audited or have any questions about the grant, that's kind of your proof that you completed the requirements, at least as far as we're concerned. for the grant. That's the general grant life cycle. For the most part right now, the way we're managing the grants is via email and DocuSign. Right, so you would receive documents that signed electronically via DocuSign. You receive emails from us, and you'll email things to us back and forth as needed to manage the business of the grant. And what we're going to cover today largely is that process. We have a access database that we manage internally the grants here with Microsoft Access Database. We're changing that probably next year, it's looking like. So probably early 2024, we'll be shifting to a Salesforce grants management solution. It's not going to impact your 22 SLCGP grants or your 23 CBCG grants. You'll still be doing business normal way that we're describing today with email and DocuSign. As we move forward, probably more likely for the 25 grant cycle, we'll be using Salesforce. So we'll roll this out in early 24, probably Q1, Q2 of 24. We'll do training for all of our grantees in Salesforce. We'll take feedback from you on kind of user testing. We'll go ahead and tweak it up, and we'll start implementing it in earnest probably next fall for the 25 grant cycle. We may, as a kind of a pilot program, use Salesforce for the 2024 CBCG program. That has not been decided yet. For the most part, all other grant programs, including SLCGP, we will have to wait till the next grant cycle to use Salesforce while we train everybody and take user acceptance testing and feedback. So that's in the future. And that is pretty much the overview that I have. Are there any questions before we turn to CBCG specifically? All right, seeing none, I'll turn it over to Ms. Janine for CBCG. Take it away, Janine.
Great. Thank you so much, Derek. Can you advance the slides?
Yes.
Thank you all for joining. Our CBCG program is in year 2. We began year 1 in July of 2022. We had $3 million from our state legislature. We had over 60 applications and 24 projects awarded. We're now in the closeout stage for most of those projects. A few had POP extensions that will close out towards the end of this year and early next year. Year 2 is where we are now. We were awarded $5.65 million. We have currently 37 projects that are well on their way into beginning the process. They've received all their MOAs, and we are looking at reimbursements coming in. So we're good to go for year 2 in terms of starting out. Next slide, please, sir. The super great news that we have is that we will have a year 3 that Derek just mentioned. We may be the pilot for the Salesforce. That will be for fiscal year 24, and that POP will be July 1, 2024 through June 30, 2025. Just wanting to let you guys know, we've kind of a typo there. Please forgive me. Please check our website. That's where we typically put all updates regarding the CBCG program, as well as our other grant programs. And you can find details like the release of our notice of funding opportunity, our application and submission deadlines. Next slide, please, Derek. I'm not really going to go over the recipient documents because all of you on the call have gone through the process of receiving your award letter, your MOA, and you are working on reimbursement request forms. I will mention for CBCG this year, we have, thank you, Lisa, changed from having quarterly reports to not having biannual reports. So it's most important that you stay current with your biannual reports, which that means every 6 months. Because once you submit your request for reimbursement, if you're not current in your reporting, we would have to ask you to make sure you go back and submit that. Site visits and closeouts happen as much as we can. If there becomes a situation where you've had a change of equipment, you need a change of vendor, anything that's going to affect your MOA and your scope of work, we will handle minor scope modifications on a case-by-case basis. Please email anything of that nature to our CBCG email inbox, cbcg@ncdps.gov. Please have your concern and request on your letterhead, going to detail as much as possible regarding if it was an equipment that's no longer available, you're utilizing the same vendor with a different equipment, price point, give us the detail. Are you ordering less or more, et cetera? And email that over to us. We'll get that reviewed within the branch. Our branch manager make a decision on those. And we definitely discourage any major scope modifications. That would be something that you applied for in your application and you were approved for in your application, but after you were awarded your grant, that you're changing the entire scope of your work. We find that that would be unfair to all of the counties that applied for the grant because you were awarded based upon your application. So if you have run into a situation of that nature, please reach out to us, and major scope modification requests have to be reviewed and approved by the director. Thank you, Derek. Next slide. I'm not going to talk about the CBCG MOAs. Those are all out. Any CBCG recipients who have questions regarding their MOA, you can email our inbox or email to me directly. I also reserve Tuesday mornings and Wednesday mornings from 9 to 10:15, where I can meet with any one of our grantees. If you have questions, concerns, or just want to reach out, send me an email or a Teams appointment. I definitely will accept those as much as possible. Everyone knows about the 5 required documents. You do not need to resubmit these unless you've had changes. For example, you may have a new finance officer. You will need to resubmit your electronic vendor payment form. Also, one thing I want to point out about the electronic vendor payment form is that there is a portion on the form where it asks for email notification. If normally the finance officer, they'll get the electronic payment. If someone on the EM side wants to receive that email notification, thank you, Derek. Scroll down. Okay, right here. Under new financial information, there's an email remit address section there. That's where you can put up to 2. You have to separate the email addresses by semicolon. Okay. So that's how you would receive electronic email notification regarding a payment that has been processed. Our procurement policy, you guys know the deal on that. When you're submitting your reimbursement requests, be sure to submit invoices and all proof of payments. If you have questions regarding acceptable proof of payment, we can meet and discuss that, or you can email me and I'll respond and give you a heads up on it. So if there are any questions regarding CBCG, I can accept those at this time.
And there's the CBCG email box that you mentioned for y'all. And I'm just going to go back for a second, just show y'all the CBCG website, which this should be going to that.
Mm-hmm.
If you just Google NCEM CBCG, you'll come to our website for this. And for those that might not be, fully understand what CBCG is, it's a grant, a state grant that is only available to certain counties. So pretty much all counties, except for these ineligible counties here, can apply, but only counties that are not on this list are eligible to apply for CBCG. So unfortunately, local governments that are not counties, cities, towns, villages, what have you, would not be eligible to apply for CBCG, just the eligible counties. And the reason these counties are ineligible is because these were the largest counties in North Carolina. The state legislature wanted to make this grant CBC available to the non-largest counties, some of the smaller counties. So these folks are excluded. All the other counties are able to apply for CBCG, and that's the eligible scope of applicants. And all the information is on the website here for CBCG, as you mentioned. Okay, thank you, Janine. Are there any questions for CBCG? Okay. With that, we need to take a break, or can we keep moving on? All right, we're going to push forward without a break. Of course, if you're online, you can take a break to stop yourself and do that, but we're going to push forward on to SLCGP, which is what our most question was, why most of you are here today. Okay. Okay. So pretty much the same introduction I gave for CBCG applies here.
So Derek, I was gonna ask, did we bring on anyone new that didn't have an opportunity to introduce themselves? Okay,
No, we did not.
all right, just
Okay.
making sure.
Okay, great. All right. So, as I said, pretty much the same exact introduction I gave for SLCGP. I'm not going to repeat that again. It was a mouthful. But basically the same slide here. Same things apply. SLCGP is just one of our 10, major non-disaster preparedness grants that we manage. It's our newest grant program. It's administered with funding through FEMA, DHS/FEMA. So the folks online today are most likely sub-recipients of FY22 SLCGP. Looking ahead, we did apply for and we expect to receive funding for FY23 SLCGP. So we expect to receive that funding by December 1st. We'll receive our award. And we expect to double our funding from about $5 million to $10 million when we get that new award. Once we get that award, we'll go and start soliciting applications for sub-recipients, most likely in December of this year after we get the award. So that will be turned around pretty quickly here. We'll be accepting application for 23 SLCGP very soon. So pretty much that's the introduction. Any questions for me? All right, with that, I'm going to give you to your SME, your subject matter expert on SLCGP, Miss Lisa Patton.
Good morning, everybody. So as you know, if you've applied in the past, the purpose of the state and local cybersecurity grant program is to assist state, local, and territorial. This does include the Eastern Band of Cherokee, should they choose to apply. And the tribe also has their own SLCGP grant if they choose to apply for that. So it's to help the governments with managing and reducing systemic risks, cybersecurity risks. And we did provide a link that is to the FEMA website so that you can look up the specific NOFO for that. The 2023 SLCGP NOFO has been released, but you'll be able to find both years at that website. One moment.
Slide.
Yes, please. Yeah, I'm off kilter on my side, so give me just one moment. Okay. All right, so in year one of the SLCGP grant, which was 2022, that period of performance is December 1st, 2022 to 11/30/2026. Just know that that is the federal period of performance. On your 2022 MOA, you will see a different period of performance. We have to cut that off early. So you should see February 28th, 2026 as your end of period of performance on your MOA. The reason we do this, we have to make sure that we get all of your documents in. We provide you with your full reimbursements or any de-obligated amounts should you end up not using all of your award. So we have to have time to be able to process these and then close the grant ourselves come November 30th, 2026. So don't be upset if you see a little different date on there or get confused to which is your date. Your date on your MOA is the period of performance that you will need to stick by. In 2022, we did award $5 million. We had over 80 applications from local agencies. We were able to fund 67 applications with those funds, and we met the match. North Carolina Emergency Management met the match requirement, providing 10% of the match for the local. Year two, as Derek just said, we've nearly doubled our award amount. It's over 10 million. NOFO has already dropped, which is a little bit different than what we see on the slide deck, but we will get that updated. And again, the funding increase is a big push for us, and we hope to do exactly what we did last year, providing as much funds as we can to the locals. So look forward to getting those applications, and by sitting in these trainings, as often as you can. You'll learn a little bit more about how to apply and really have a strong application. Don't wait till the last minute. And these are some things that we can talk about as we go through today. We'll go ahead to the next slide.
Thanks. And jumping in real quickly, Lisa.
Yeah.
We are going to go ahead and try to post competitive application that we
Mhm.
received in 22.
Mhm.
The redacted competitive application on our website.
Right.
Right, so by popular request, we've had, we had a subject graciously volunteered to help us with this, but some folks that particularly didn't receive funding in 2022 or interested in applying in 23 said, hey, you'll have an example of a good application. And we have an example of an application from 2022 that was successful, that scored very well. We've redacted out all the information from that. We have information from that subrecipient to go ahead and post it on our website to help y'all as you apply moving forward in 23. Now, be cautioned, you can't just cut and paste, obviously, from that application into your own. Every project's different, every grant is different. And honestly, the 23 application itself is going to be a little bit different than the 22 application. However, it will give you some information to see at least what a successful application looked like in 22 that we post on our website here very shortly.
And before we switch slides, I do need to back up and say, for the year one period of performance beginning 12/1/2022, that is because this is retroactive. So if you have eligible purchases made from, previous to signing your MOA, you can backdate those to 2/1/2022. So just keep that in mind if you have expenditures that apply to your actual grant award.
Great. As Lisa mentioned, it was a 10% match for 22, and the state, North Carolina, North Merchant Match, particularly where I work, graciously agreed to pay that match on behalf of the entire state. So there's no match required for any of our subrecipients. So y'all are not required to match anything. You can voluntarily provide match if you want, but it's not required. We've covered that obligation. In year two, the match goes up to 20%. And again, NCEM, State of North Carolina, has agreed to cover that required match. So there will be no match required of any of our subrecipients selected for funding in 23. We're going to go and cover that match for y'all. So that's the beautiful thing about this grant from your perspective is there's no required match.
So we're also currently getting the application for the 2023 award built out for you guys. And the way this cycle falls, we hope to have that available for you in December. Again, you should have 30 days to fill out that application. If we can give longer, we will, but it is our normal process to leave those applications open for 30 days. So we will try to get those out in December. And as Derek said, it's going to be a little bit different application. The the Cybersecurity Committee has worked to lend some weight to each of those questions. So you'll be able to see the scoring and the weight of each question. And again, you don't want to attempt to fill that out all by yourself. It normally takes a group of people. So pull in your professional teams, know what your gaps in service are, learn where you can become stronger, and pay attention to the 2023 Notice of Funding Opportunity, because that will give you guidance on what you should be striving towards in the cybersecurity realm.
And with the 23 applications, a question we get sometimes with any of our grant applications from applicants, they ask if we can help with their grant application or if we can help address issues with their grant application. And the answer to that is unequivocally no, we cannot, because it's a competitive grant. So we cannot help any one particular applicant over other applicants. So if you have any questions, we do ask they be sent to the SLCGP email box. We cannot provide individual assistance on helping you complete any competitive grant application. Here we go, how to apply.
So the application will be posted on our website. You'll have the links here. This slide deck will be posted after the meeting. And so you'll be able to have access to these links. So you would just go to the link, probably have a downloadable PDF version for you to work off of. That hasn't been determined yet. Again, we are building out that 2023 application. We do have the 2022 Notice of Funding link here. Again, that has been updated on our website to the 2023 Notice of Funding and on the FEMA website. But just check back periodically. We also have additional recordings from previous SLCGP guidance driven recordings that you can access from our website. I can go on down. I'm sorry, if you could stay.
Yeah, I was going to just that show website.
Oh, gotcha. So you'll be able to access all of our grants on the NCDPS website.
If you just Google SLCGP, NCEM, this should come up to this website here.
I dropped the email address in the chat. I was trying to drop the link in.
Perfect. And again, stay tuned to this website here for when we make the FY23 SLCGP application available for subrecipient or sub-applicants. It'll be up here on this website. So the link and all the information about the program is here. Primarily, this is 22 information. A lot of it does apply for 23, but it's primarily 22 information. And there's also FAQs that we have from 22 here. So as we get those questions into the SLCGP email box, we try to put them up here for everybody to see and understand. All right, I'll go back to the presentation.
And the bottom part of your slide deck there talks about sam.gov registration and UEID. I can tell you, if in order to apply for any federal grant funding, you must have a UEID. You can go to sam.gov. It walks you through how to do that. Now, the UEID is a specialized number. Think of it like a social security number for your agency. That will never change. Once it's assigned to you, it will not change. What will change is the sam.gov registration. That expires after 1 year, so you have to constantly be renewing that. So on our applications, you will see that your UEID is required. And what another item that you'll also see on the 2023 applications when they do come out is we will still ask that question regarding environmental and historic preservation. That is an EHP form. What that consists of is if you have any construction at all, if you're hammering a nail in the wall, if you're scooping a spoonful of dirt, it's considered construction and you must fill one of those forms out. Now, those things usually take 2 to 3 months to get back just on average, but we have seen them take much longer. So if you know that your application will, or that your project scope of work will be requiring construction, just be prepared to fill out that EHP. You can also find that at FEMA.gov, and I'm just going to put FEMA.gov in the chat and put environmental and historical preservation in there. But just be prepared that that's one item that will be on the application. We even found some folks that checked no, that did require an EHP, so we had to double back and get them to fill out those forms for 2022. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give us a call and ask. We can assist you to a point with those EHPs. So,
Yeah, for EHP, so they don't complete the EHP unless they're selected for a project though, correct? They have to check off a box on the application.
yes, if you're awarded,
EHP will be required.
yes,
We don't get involved in processing EHP until the point of.
until the award.
Yeah.
That's right.
So yeah, we cannot help you with the application at all. Other if you have a question about, if you need to do an EHP, but once you get a project awarded, we can certainly assist you at that point with the requirements for the EHP.
That's right. And again, and the only reason I bring that up at this point is because it is on the application. So a lot of people not really knowing and not reading the tooltip or the drop down didn't realize that they needed to check yes on that box. So it's just an important tip to remember.
Hey, Lisa,
Yes,
just a real quick question on the EHP.
sure.
This is Kevin. I was one of those that I selected yes, but then through some equipment changes was able to select no and not do it.
I remember, Kevin. Yeah.
With the retroactive period of performance, and you're not supposed to have started stuff that would cause an EHP until that EHP is complete. If it's a project already going on, I was a little nervous when we thought we had to do an EHP, but we had a period of performance that was retroactive to the award.
Yeah, it's a pretty fine line, Kevin. So all I can suggest is the retroactive period of performance only works, like you just said, for those who do not require an EHP. Now, I'm not familiar with any subrecipients that we've ever had that have started a project prior to an EHP being prepared. So I can't give any guidance there. I can turn it over to Derek and see if if you recall of anybody that started a project prior to an EHP being approved.
Yeah, no, and again, to be clear, this is projects for which the federal funding applies, right? We have had folks that have started projects that are not funded with federal grant funds, but the project does not involve the actual construction renovation. It might be to put some furniture, purchase some furniture for a building that's being built or something that's being built, or to buy some computers or equipment that's not being installed. So the project itself, the construction of that facility had already started, but the grant money was just used to buy things that would not themselves require an EHP. So we've had that situation come up before. But really, in the case of this situation, had you started a project that was being funded and required an EHP due to the retroactive period of performance, in 12/1, this should be something we have to go back to FEMA and say, look, under these circumstances, they're a little bit unusual. The project was started before the EHP got submitted. What can we do to kind of figure this out? We intervene on your behalf with FEMA to do that. So I don't think it would be a huge deal. But for the most part, the general rule is if you are doing any type of construction renovation activity, like Lisa said, hammer a nail on a wall, disturbing a teaspoonful of dirt, anything like that at all, using federal grant funds to support that particular project, then the EHP must be completed first. And the reason FEMA does that, and the reason we require it of y'all is really to legally protect you, because the minute you use federal funding for a construction renovation project, a whole suite and panoply of additional federal laws apply. Environmental and historic based, you can't disturb Native American burial grounds. You can't disturb certain environmental sites with migratory bird patterns. There's probably 50 different laws that apply. So by going through the EHP review process, you are basically protecting yourself and shielding yourself from liability in the future. So that's why FEMA requires that. And it's kind of a service they do for you. It's almost like free legal advice they're providing for you. Make sure you're good to go. If you're not using federal funds, for that construction renovation, then these federal laws do not apply. So that's why we don't worry about it at that point. But only when federal funding is being used does the EHP kick in. It's really designed to protect you from liabilities, inadvertently violate any of these federal laws associated with environmental and historic preservation.
Now, there's a couple of times that you will not have to submit an EHP, and that if your building is less than 30 years old and you've had an EHP within a 3-year period. Now, don't quote me on those exact dates, but there are circumstances where you may not require an EHP if you've had one recently and your building's of a certain age. Those kind of details we'd have to get into directly with the subrecipient. But if that's all for your question there, Kevin, I'll go ahead and move forward with the 5 documents.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the question, sir. Appreciate it.
So the 5 required documents, I think that we might have spoken about that a little bit earlier. Again, these are not needed if your agency has already submitted. It would only be in the incidents that you are submitting a new 2023 application and you don't have any other grant awards with North Carolina Emergency Management. So those 5 required documents would be the State of North Carolina Substitute W-9. You would use the links provided here in this PowerPoint until they're made available online. I think we may actually have this on our website for all of our grants. We do have a new electronic vendor payment form. I'm not sure if this link has been updated, but we will make sure that we get that on the website, the updated electronic vendor form. That's a very important form to fill out. You have to make sure that you fill out every box. You have to make sure you have a signature on it. You need to make sure that you save it to PDF before submitting it, because if you don't save it to a PDF, the signature line will disappear. It's one of those quirky forms. Also, with the electronic vendor payment form, you must attach a canceled check or a bank ACH letter, not a bank statement. We cannot accept any bank statements, so you have to make sure that you're filling that out. If I could just step back for a moment to that W-9, make sure you use that link because that does provide you with the state sub W-9. We do not want your IRS W-9 forms. those, we can't do anything with. We have to have the state substitute W-9.
If I can jump in real quickly, so I'm sorry, on the electronic vendor payment form issue. So this is the correct website for the electronic vendor payment form. Jeannie, if you can drop the link to that in the chat, I'd appreciate it. But basically, the link that we had previously provided was through Department of Administration, but actually the Office of State Controller, in the website, it contains the correct form. It's not going to be a big deal if you submitted the old one. That's they're really the same form, basically. The only difference is the OSC form has an additional page that has instructions, whereas the one on the DOA website does not have the instruction page. So this is, we'll accept either of the forms, but really, if you want to be perfect moving forward, this is the correct form to submit. Looks like it was recently updated in September 2023 with these correct instructions. So that's this is the correct form.
Thank you, Derek.
All right.
Okay, and then the other three policy, or the other three items, documents that are required are your conflict of interest policy. We do recognize that this is sometimes part of your procurement policy, but we do ask that you do a single page or however many pages your conflict of interest policy portion is, to do that as a single document so that it can be filed properly on our side. Your procurement policy, obviously your own, and then the sworn no overdue tax statement certification. So this is an item that we ask you to fill out. Oftentimes we'll get questions if the county board or county manager should be the person to sign it. It can be anyone authorized by your agency to sign that document. So don't feel that you have to wait until your county manager or a person gets back from a vacation. We often hear that over the summer months, somebody's on vacation. We can't get this for 3 weeks. I'm like, okay. So just, and again, even if you have submitted these as an agency, if you get an updated procurement policy or an updated conflict of interest policy, anything like that, you are responsible for resubmitting and acknowledging that through your resubmission to us, so that we can update your folder on our end. We're not going to come out and ask and investigate these once a year to find out if your items are up to date. That's up to you to submit. So we think you're capable of doing that as well. So we can move on to the next slide. And any questions? And I did want to point out that while we are grant experts on this side, we are not cybersecurity experts. So if you do have any cybersecurity related questions, please be sure to continue to email those in to slcgp@ncdps.gov. We'll drop that in the chat for you. Do you have any questions for SLCGP so far?
Go ahead, Carl.
So I'm going over the MOU, and under the funds management, it says that we shall create a separate fund and accounting structure.
Yes, sir.
Does it have to be a separate fund, or
Yep.
can it be a separate line item?
So, and we're going to talk about the MOA. I'm glad you brought that up. We're going to go over that. We'll take a break and get into the MOA here in a minute. But that particular provision really does not require necessarily a separate account, but the funds have to be reported in such a way that you can run a specific revenue report showing all the monies that come in for the grant, and then the expenditure report showing all the monies that are expended for the grant. So you got to be able to run some type of ledger or report showing the specific revenues and expenditures attributable to the grant. And, for audit purposes, they should hopefully reconcile and zero balance out. That's basically what that provision says.
Okay. It's difficult for us to create a fund that we have to go
Right.
through the commissioners and get
Yeah,
approval.
exactly. Yeah.
I can just create a line item in my IT budget that says the cybersecurity grant and everything that's bought and money coming in would be in that line item and that line item only. We're okay with that?
Yes, again, it depends. As long as you can show reporting, that you can clearly show the revenues and the expenditures associated with the grant. What they're trying to prevent against is kind of a commingling of funds where folks, might charge expenditures to different revenues or attribute different revenues to those expenditures. So we're trying to prevent a commingle of funds, and just we need a clear accounting of revenues, expenditures attributed to the federal grant. As long as you do that, you should be good.
That makes it
Great
easier for
question.
us.
Thank you, sir. And yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, so I was just gonna say Janine dropped some great information in the chat about some additional requirements for the SLCGP grant. Derek probably covered these in the MOA, but they are the NCSR, which is the National Cybersecurity Review. That is a requirement of each subrecipient of the SLCGP grant. Keep in mind, if you are a county and you see your name on there, there's a good possibility that we have an HSGP grant with your county, which is the Homeland Security Grant. So it's possible that somebody else, like your emergency management group in your county, is already working to complete that cyber hygiene and NCSR. But you're IT, right? You're IT with the county, so you probably already know that as well. You are only required to turn in one at the county level. You do not have to submit two separate.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, you say county level, at the organizational level, right? So
No, at the county level.
no, for cities and towns, they have to submit their own.
That's true.
Yeah, they're required.
Yep.
We have subrecipients that are not counties for SLCGP. So
That's
if
true.
you are a local government entity, you have to submit your NCSR. You cannot rely on the county you're in to submit the NCSR for you. Okay, so each subrecipient of SLCGP, unless you're a state agency, there's a couple state agencies, you have to submit your own NCSR. It's required.
Yes, but at the county level, there is the possibility that someone from emergency management group has received a Homeland Security grant. So just be aware of that so that you're not both duplicating efforts to try to complete that cybersecurity review. The cyber hygiene services, I wish our partner Brad Garrett was here because he can speak more to that. But Janine has again provided 2 links in the drop in their chat here so that you can easily maneuver over and click on those links, and they're provided here in the slide deck for you to review later.
Yep, and we'll cover this in the MOA review as well, because all these requirements are spelled out in the MOA. But as Lisa said, essentially NCSR, it's a yearly reporting requirement that is required for SLCGP subrecipients as well as HSGP subrecipients. If you get both of those grants, you're only required to submit one NCSR each year. And essentially, it's a self-assessment of your cybersecurity posture that's completed via a questionnaire submitted through an agency called CISA. I forget what that stands for, but CISA is a federal agency that deals with us. You'll submit the review through them. They'll go ahead and issue a completion certificate when you complete the review. You hold that completion certificate and provide that to us and show that as proof that you completed your annual NCSR. The NCSR is open typically between October 1st and September 28th each year. Again, all this is spelled out in the MOS when you do those NCSRs. Cyber hygiene services, that's an additional requirement for SLCGP. Again, that is through CISA. There's information about how you do that. It's free. All these things are free and no cost to you. But basically, it's just a suite of services that's provided free of charge. A little bit of monitoring services and things like that to make sure your cyber hygiene's up to par. You're required to do it if you're a subrecipient of FY22 SLCGP. We do not require you to submit proof that you've complied with it. However, we require you to retain that proof. And then if we ever ask for it, you have to provide that proof to us that you completed your cyber hygiene services. It's kind of a recurring service you have to do. We don't want all that paperwork sent to us. Unlike the NCSR, with the annual certificate, you send that to us one time each year. Cyber hygiene services, you do it, we'll request proof if we need to from you on cyber hygiene. So that's the gist of that. Okay, anything else?
Nope, I just dropped CISA in the chat. Stands for Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
There you go. All right, thank you. All right, so with that, we've been talking for a little over an hour now. We're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break. For those that are actual SLCGP subrecipients, if, as Carl was mentioning, if you have your MOA, Memorandum of Agreement, available, that will be the time to go ahead and make sure you get a copy of that, because we're going to be talking about the MOA here in a little more detail after the break. So if you are a subrecipient of FY22 SLCGP, if you have access to it, it would be beneficial to you going to this next segment if you had a copy of MOA in front of you as we speak. So with that, we'll take a 5-minute break I'll put the Google timer up on the screen and we'll reconvene at approximately 10 a.m. Thank you. Okay, folks, welcome back. Our 5-minute Google timer is expired. So at this point, hopefully, if you do have an SLCGP FY22 award, you have your MOA in front of you. And we're getting into kind of going through the MOA in a little more detail. And I want to share an example MOA with you that I've redacted the information from just to share. And we'll use that as kind of our basis for our discussion. So let me go ahead and bring that document up on the screen right now. Give me a second. Okay. So, as kind of a caveat before we get into this thing, it is 17 pages long. This is a legal document. It's a contract, right? There's a lot of information in here that is kind of CYA information, right? That in the event something happens, this kind of covers it. So it's all important. But a lot of this stuff is not going to come up on a daily basis, right? It's just in there in case something happens. So I'm going to try to highlight for you today kind of the provisions of the 17 pages that are most important in the daily management of the grant. So you can focus on those provisions as you review these documents. I encourage you to read this document in its entirety. It's important. It's all the terms and conditions associated with the award. But I'm going to hit the highlights of what you really need to know for daily management of the grant. Okay, so having said that, you can follow along with my screen or follow along with your own MOA if you have it. When you read these 17-page documents, the header of the documents is probably one of the most important things to look at. You're going to see your information identified as the subrecipient at the top of the header. So again, being a federal grant, you are the subrecipient.
And I'm sorry, Derek, you're not actually sharing.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. So being a, let me make it a little bigger too, so people can see it a little better. Okay, so being a federal grant, you are the subrecipient. We are actually the recipient. So we receive the grant on behalf of the state of North Carolina. We pass it through to you as a subrecipient. So we are identified as the recipient on the MOA. You are identified as the subrecipient on the MOA. Okay, if this were a state grant, we would be identified as the grantor. You'd be the recipient. So it gets confusing. That's why in common speak, we refer to y'all as grantees. But for the MOA purposes, it's more precise. You're the subrecipient, we're the recipient for this particular MOA because it's a federal grant. So it'll have your information up here identified as the subrecipient. It will have the amount of money that you received, right? Probably the most important thing, how much did you all get? In this case, this particular organization received $99,650. And that POP period of performance, which in this case is December 1st, 2022 to February 28th, 2026. What does that mean? You got to spend this money, right, within these dates. So you got to spend your award amount within the period of performance.
And again, that's not to be confused with that federal period of performance, which actually goes until November of 2026. You want to be sure to follow your period of performance on your MOA.
So you can't have expenditures prior to December 1st, 2022. And you can't have expenditures after February 20th, 2026, unless you were to get a request that we receive a POP extension. These are the dates by which you have to execute your balance. If you have money left over, say you spend $99,649 and you have $1 left over or whatever it might be. When you do final closeout, you can request to deobligate those remaining funds and bring that grant balance down to zero. So you don't have to spend it exactly. You can underspend and deobligate the rest of the money. Can't overspend, but you can underspend and deobligate the money. So this is pretty much the header. I definitely recommend reading that. The first couple paragraphs are more just the purpose and background information. Probably the most important sentence here is the scope of work is the approved application is submitted by the recipient with any amendments approved by recipient, by us. So basically, this is attachment 1 to this MOA, and this is what you are eligible to receive reimbursements for, to complete the agreed, approved scope of work along with any amendments to that scope of work. So this is pretty important in terms of this is what you can buy stuff for and get reimbursed for. It's the scope of work. So if you have an approved scope of work that you competed for to buy certain equipment for your cybersecurity program, and you have eligible expenditures related to that equipment, you can get reimbursed for it. But If you decided to do training on that equipment, right, and that was not part of your scope of work, it was just to buy the equipment, then that training would not be covered, right? Only the cost of the equipment will be covered. And when you submit your application, you submit a scope of work, and as you know, there's a budget associated with that as well. So you'll see the budget and scope of work, and it's got to be related to that to be reimbursable under the grant. So again, some background information, these first couple paragraphs, funding and so forth. Funding eligibility criteria. All, if you've received an award, you already overcome this hurdle. But this is somewhat complicated under North Carolina law. That you have to be a quote local government entity to be eligible to receive SLCGP funding through this program. And what's that mean in North Carolina? It's defined by statute as all these various entities. So it's not just counties, cities, towns. There's villages, mosquito control districts, hospital districts, county water and sewer districts, public transportation authorities, and so forth. All these type of entities, if you are subject to the local government commission, the LGC, in accordance with this statute, you could be an eligible subrecipient. You could apply for SLCGP funding. Additionally, we have a lot of community colleges that have also applied and received SLCGP funding for FY22 SLCGP. Because this is a cybersecurity grant, per this particular statute, community colleges are also included in the definition of a local government entity and are eligible to receive SLCGP funding. So all these entities and community colleges are eligible subrecipients. So we have a broad scope of folks who can receive this. And that's what this paragraph says. This is some of the stuff we already covered in our presentation. You have to have a UEID. You have to be registered in SAMS, annual registration, and so forth. So pretty much this is all just kind of background information. In the compensation, the paragraph, this is again just an acknowledgement of how much you're receiving, which is identified at the top of the award, at the top of the MOA. It's also in your award letter you received prior to this. But basically, that's how much you're receiving. You're not allowed. We had a question for this yesterday in another grant program. You're not allowed to subgrant these funds. So you're applying, you're the sub-recipient for these funds. You can buy items or services and provide those to other entities, but you can't sub-award the money out further. We get it, we sub-award it to you. That's the level of sub-award that stops. You can't sub-award it out. That's what this basically says. But basically, it's, again, this is not terribly important unless you were going to try to sub-award money and couldn't do it. Getting into paragraph 6, this is where it starts getting a little more important. If you kind of read any particular paragraphs, let's start with paragraph 6 in the MOA here. This lays out some responsibilities that you have. And in particular, this verifies that there's no match required for you. Again, you can voluntarily provide a match, but you're not required to provide a match or a cost share. So what's that mean? We have some grant programs, for example, EMPG, Emergency Management Performance Grant Program, which is a grant program for our counties, that requires a dollar for dollar match. So if you receive a $100,000 EMPG award, you'd be required to provide either a hard match or an in-kind match of eligible expenditures equaling $100,000, right? But with this particular SLCGP award, you receive a $100,000 award, you're not required to provide a cash or in-kind match to match it. We cover the match requirement for y'all. That's very important for this award. You can, if you want, so say you had a project that cost $200,000, the maximum funding you can receive under this award is $100,000. You could voluntarily provide the extra $100,000 for that project. That's totally acceptable, allowable. But we're only reimbursing $100,000, and it's not required that you match anything. That's how that plays out. And then here's the required documents we talked about with the links to the various documents that we can provide for you that are required. Here's your progress reports. Okay, so in addition to the NCSR and cyber hygiene provisions, paragraph C here, paragraph 6C, annual progress reports. You're required to provide an annual progress report submitted to the SLCGP email box using the progress report form with attachment 2 to the MOA, and use the dates you have to submit it for. Okay, so basically the annual progress report runs concurrent with the state fiscal year. So it's 7/1, for example, for fiscal year 2023-24, the annual report cycle would be 7/1/23 through 6/30/24. And then your annual report would be due 30 days after the end of the state fiscal year by 7/31/24. And for the 24-25 state fiscal year, again, that period would start 7/1/24 and go through 6/31/25. Your report would be due 7/31/25. And then, since the POP ends in 2026, with your final reimbursement request, when you submit that per paragraph 90 below, you will submit one more annual report. So you would have 3 annual reports required for this particular MOA. Now, let's say you're really on top of things and you go and spend all your money by, before 7/31/25. So it only takes you a year or so to spend your money. And we actually close your grant out. You're not required to submit further reports after that. So one advantage, if you want to try to get your grant done sooner, is that you stop your obligation to submit annual reports. But assuming you take the full amount of time to spend your money, these are the reports that are due with the schedule that they're due. Until you close out your grant, even if there's no expenditures, an annual progress report is required. So let's say, kind of conversely, you go through this whole first year, you haven't spent a cent. It comes 7/31/25, you haven't spent a cent of your grant money. So you have to submit a report saying, hey, no expenditures on this grant. So until you close the grant out, you must submit an annual report. NCSR, this is what we talked about already. These are when your NCSR is important. These are when your NCSRs are required. We're required to have 4 during the period of performance of the grant. Here's the dates that they're required. So again, if you go to this link, the NCSR tool opens up on 10/1 and closes on 2/28. So the first NCSR, you can go ahead and do it right now if you want. It's open, but you have to complete it sometime between 10/1/23, 2/28/24. Go ahead and get your copy of your certificate when it's complete. It's in that certificate to us, so we have proof that you completed the NCSR. And then here it is for the second year, and third year, and fourth year. That's the NCSR requirements. Cyber hygiene. Again, this is a web application scanning. It's a internet scanning as a service. Assesses the health of your public accessible web applications by checking for known vulnerabilities and weak configurations. So it's basically vulnerability scanning. And here's how you do it. Here's a website you go to complete it. You basically only have to provide proof that you've done it to us upon request. You've got to do this throughout the period of performance of the grant. But we're only going to, you're not required to submit documentation to us unless we ask for it. That's what this paragraph says for cyber hygiene. Moving on. So paragraph 6 is very important. Paragraph 8 is also important. It talks about the scope of work. And again, that's as the project specified in attachment 1 in your application, along with any amendments to that application. That's your approved scope of work. Here's documentation you have to provide throughout the period of performance. Again, your annual reports and CSR, cyber hygiene services, and so forth. If you have any exercises that are funded with this grant, you have to provide after action reports from those exercises. That's required along with your request for reimbursement for those expenditures if you're funded for exercises. If you do any training with funds from this grant, you have to provide a training course roster, description, and syllabus. And when you submit your request for reimbursement, this is all the stuff that you have to submit.
So Derek, could you scroll back up for just a moment? One of the things that I wanted to mention is we do have a lot of cybersecurity/IT folks on here that are not based in emergency management. So that Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation Program link will be helpful because those exercises do have to be set up a certain way in order to, get credit and properly do those after action reports. So it provides you a structure and forms within the HESEP for you to be able to do those exercise evaluations.
All right, thank you for that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would definitely read paragraph 6, 8, and then the big one, paragraph 9. Okay, this lays out our responsibilities as the recipient, providing the pass-through funding to y'all, and then your responsibilities as the subrecipient. Okay, our responsibilities are pretty minimal. You know, we have to go ahead and provide funding to you as agreed for eligible expenditures associated with the approved project. That's essentially what our obligation is to y'all. But for y'all, you've got a whole host of things that you're required to do, all laid out in paragraph 9, responsibilities for the subrecipient.
And we do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, it's from Kevin. If we spend all of our funds in year 1 and close the grant out, do we have to submit an NCSR in subsequent years? Yes, you do. And that's because the grant is open still under the federal period of performance. So you will have to submit, even if you've completed your project, for the full period of performance, the full federal period of performance. If there's an NCSR open, you will have to fill that out. One other thing to note, if for any reason the state asks for an extension of the 22 SLCGP, if we're granted an extension through FEMA and the NCSR opens during that extension period, you will still be required to fill it out. But you will be notified from us as the SAA if we have requested an extension, so that you're aware that you would still have to submit the NCSR. But again, yes, all 3 years under the period of performance, you will have to submit. Thanks for that great question, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Kind of a nuance there, because our annual reports are not required if you've completed the grant and closed it out. That's something we can control, but the NCSR is required for the entire duration of the period of performance. We don't control that. That's set through CISA and FEMA. So good distinction there. Okay. So this goes into your responsibilities. So this paragraph 9, subrecipient A. Hope you've already done this, but if you haven't, your MOA had to be signed within 30 days after you received the MOA. So your obligation started right there. And then as we move on here, paragraph 9C gets into procurement. Procurement under federal grants, you can take an entire week-long class on that subject alone. I'm going to try to boil it down for you and just into kind of the Cliff Notes version, as simple as I can. And again, I would encourage you to read this information, go to these website links, talk to your finance and procurement professionals before you expend funds, before you purchase items, goods or services under the grant. But basically, you have to utilize the most restrictive state, your own local procurement policies, or the federal grant policies. The most restrictive of those policies has to be utilized when you're procuring goods or services with federal grant funds. Okay. If you're procuring goods or services with your own funding, obviously you follow your own policies. But when you're using federal funds, a little different set of rules could apply. What does this mean in kind of practical terms? If you're making a small purchase, there's something called a micro purchase threshold at the federal government level. And I'm not sure if I think it's $10,000, currently a micro purchase threshold. But if you utilize the federal micro purchase threshold of $10,000 and you bought something less than that, pretty much just go ahead and buy that off of Amazon or out of Walmart. No competition is required. You can look at what you want, you go ahead and buy it. So it's a micro purchase or small purchase. But let's say under your own particular procurement policy, your small purchase threshold or your micro purchase threshold was $2,500 or $3,000, right? In that case, if you bought something for $5,000, because your local procurement policy threshold is $2,500 to $3,000 for a small purchase or micro purchase, you have to use that, and that would no longer be a micro purchase. That would be the next level up, which requires some level of bids or competition. Okay. The next level up for federal purposes is between $10,000 and $250,000 simplified acquisition threshold or the SAT. So that requires basically 3 quotes and then some other things. But you probably have a more restrictive procurement policy locally than that, where you require certain levels of bids or competition at lower dollar thresholds. So for the most part, at least what I've seen in my experience, usually your local procurement policies are stricter than federal policies. You're going to follow your own local procurement policies for the most part. I have seen some jurisdictions in North Carolina whose procurement policy will say, well, if we're buying something with any funds other than federal funds, here's the requirements that we follow. However, if we are using federal funds to make a purchase, then we follow the federal rules. So if you do that, it's kind of smart, right? Then you're using the federal thresholds and the federal rules for your federal grant purchases. So in that case, you're using the federal threshold. But unless you have that kind of clause or provision in your policy, you're using your local policy across the board for all your purchases. That's the gist of it in a nutshell. Whenever you're making purchases with federal dollars, there are certain specific contract clauses that you have to include as well. That's in this appendix here. It's linked here in the MOA. That's pretty much it in a nutshell for procurement. There's some other things that we have here in North Carolina under our law with the Mini Brooks Act. Basically, because you're subject to the local government commission to receive this award, your local government entity subject to the LGC, you're required to follow this Mini Brooks Act for certain procurements. If you're going to procure professional services performed by architects, engineers, surveyors, and construction managers at risk. So if you had to do that, some special rules apply. That's what these links are for. I can go into those details today. If it applies to you, take a look at this information. But basically, that's the procurement rules in a nutshell. Any questions at this point?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
So a lot of ours are services. They're not hardware.
Yep.
I'm assuming that's going to apply, but it's going to be tough to get 3 quotes from service providers for services.
Yep.
I mean, doable, but does it also apply for services?
Yeah, it's goods or services, but again, you gotta look at your own procurement policy and see what it says, as to what the requirements are. But typically, when in doubt, it's always good to have competition, right? That's really the premise of really federal procurement rules, because they want to promote competition. They want you all to get the best price, so the federal dollars go the furthest distance. So you're looking for the lowest cost responsive bidder in most cases. But again, how much of the services that you're purchasing, how much is the value? Is it less than $3,000 or $2,000, right? That it meets that small purchase or micro purchase threshold under your own policy. Well, if that's the case, 3 quotes aren't required, right? Then it's only one quote will be, one bid will be required. So it's going to depend on what your policy says in that regard. That's the reason why we ask for a copy of your procurement policy. Was when you send these things to us to get reimbursed, we need to make sure you're following your policy, right? Or we can't reimburse it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the way that works.
Do you need copies of the other quotes when we submit for reimbursement, or just
No, we don't. It's not. I mean, you can certainly submit those. We don't require that though. And we're getting into this a little bit more with the request for reimbursement. All we require is the actual quote or invoice that was, that you awarded, that you're paying. We don't require the other quotes or invoices.
So just from an assistance on our end, I don't know all the different providers out there that may provide, endpoint management protection, or I should say a managed endpoint. What's the easiest way to, find a provider so we can get a quote from them?
That's a good question. And I do know, and I'm not an expert on this, I do know there was some state contracts that had some of these services in it, because I've heard our cyberspace representative talking about those. So there may be some negotiated state contracts that you can look at to get some information about other providers as well. So I've heard folks talking about that. But other than that, again, I'm not an expert in this area, so I really can't tell you, how to find those bidders.
All right.
There are exceptions in all these procurement rules for sole source procurement. So there's a whole, if you go into the regulations, you probably have your own policy on this as well, but if you go to the federal regulations, you can be authorized sole source procurement even for a higher dollar purchase if certain thresholds or certain requirements are met. For example, if there is only one provider, right? And you can't get quotes from their provider because there is none, then a sole source would be acceptable, right? But you have to show that. If you had a certain type of system that only could be required with one particular provider, You may be able to justify a sole source for that in certain cases. It gets tricky. If there was some kind of emergency or exigency, you can justify a sole source for that. But you have to do a memo for if you're gonna do a sole source. So there's exceptions for sole source procurement as well. But yeah, the easiest thing I've seen folks do is they just go ahead and get the quotes, get the competition and select the lowest cost, lowest response bidder, just to avoid all the headache of it. But there are potential ways around it to get into the rules.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. The other thing is you can't do business with a debarred vendor. So that's what this paragraph talks about here, paragraph D. There's a federal debarment list. You have to go and look at, make sure that folks you're dealing with are not debarred at the federal level. And there's also, not to be outdone, there's a state debarred vendor listing as well. So you got to make sure that your vendor is not debarred at the federal or state level. If you were to do business with a debarred vendor, we will not be able to reimburse you, obviously, for that expenditure. So please make sure you look at those lists before you buy something. Indirect costs. So this is something we don't pay on any of our grants. And there's a federal regulation that talks about this. Indirect costs, it's kind of a unique term. It's a little bit confusing, but this is kind of like overhead. And with some grant awards, they'll say like, okay, you get $100,000 award, but you have an indirect cost rate of 10%. So if your $100,000 award, $1,000 or $10,000 of that, is indirect costs. We're gonna give you that $10,000 without having you submit any kind of reimbursement documentation for it. You're just gonna get that money because you have overhead that amount. You see that a lot with nonprofit funding. We don't do that. Indirect costs cause huge compliance concerns and issues, so we do not reimburse your indirect costs. You have to submit your receipts and your invoices for direct expenditures, and we reimburse you for those expenditures. We don't cover any kind of indirect costs or administrative costs. That's what that paragraph says. This is the request for reimbursement paragraphs. I know everybody had questions about this. This is very important. It's paragraph G. Okay, so you're going to submit your RFR to this email box when you're ready to submit it. You can submit one RFR for your entire amount. You could submit 50 RFRs if you want to go ahead and kind of nickel and dime it. That's up to you as to how many RFRs you want to submit. But basically, when you submit them to the email box. Okay, got to make sure they're for eligible costs, like the scope of work and attachment 1 to the MOA. You have to take possession of any purchase equipment or services prior to seeking reimbursement from us. So you have to actually have paid for the item and received it before it's reimbursable. And you have to submit your request for reimbursement within 60 days of payment of the invoice. Okay. So basically, you have to buy it, pay for it, receive it, pay for it, and then request the reimbursement. And within 60 days, the payment of the invoice. That's what this paragraph says.
We have a couple of hands raised.
Okay.
Mr. Carl Woody.
All
What's
right.
your question, sir?
Go ahead, Carl.
You mentioned earlier in the presentation that we could include items that were bought in, I guess, 22 or before the award amount.
Yeah.
I'm sure, we've got some that may be greater than 60 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's that going?
Yeah, that's a great question. Good nuance there. Because the period of performance of this grant is retroactive back to 12/1/22, and y'all just received your, award and MOAs just now, right? So, as long as, you submit the documentation to us and those expenditures are eligible expenditures that were incurred, after 12/1/22, we would probably go ahead and waive that 60-day requirement in that case and go ahead and just pay you off that. Because of the delay, between the one that you execute when the period of performance had started. So good question.
Nice.
And was there any other hands?
Yes, Will.
Hey, Will.
Well, I don't show your last name. I'm sorry.
Hey, yeah, it's Will Ginrat. Sorry, I just put my first name in there. I guess I got two questions. One, you mentioned this is a bit earlier, and I apologize. You may have mentioned an answer to this, but let's just say we were approved for $100,000 for the grant. However, we haven't purchased some of the equipment that we're looking at getting. And if we got these quotes back in February or so, those quotes are no longer going to be valid, and they're most likely going to be increased. So
Yeah.
they're probably going to be increased past the amount.
Yeah.
Do we? I mean, obviously, at that point in time, I don't think we're going to have any issues going past that amount using our own funds.
Right.
But I was just wondering how that works.
Yeah, it's a great question. Because things never go down, but they always go up in price, right? So I get it, especially in the IT world. But yeah, in that case, you would have to submit your invoice, and then you submit also your proof of payment. So you submit the invoice for however much it costed, proof that you paid it, and that could be in the form of a canceled check, a bank statement, an electronic payment, whatever, showing you actually paid the invoice. And then on your invoice, you'd have to go ahead and, indicate which items are covered that you're claiming reimbursement for. And then we would reimburse you up to the maximum amount of the grant. So anything over that would be your responsibility. Also, we are not able to, and it's later in the MOA here, we're not able to reimburse you for any kind of taxes. So you have to exclude the taxes from your request for reimbursement as well. We just pay for the cost of the good or service up to the maximum award amount. Along with your request for reimbursement, you submit a summary of expenditures. So that could be a spreadsheet or a Word document or just a simple PDF document, whatever you have, basically showing, okay, here's the vendor, here's date of purchase, here's the invoice number, total invoice amount, and reimbursable amount, kind of summarizing what you're claiming. You get up to the maximum amount of your award. So I know it kind of sucks. You got to pay more out of your pocket in that case, but we can only reimburse you up to the maximum amount of the award.
Yeah, that's absolutely reasonable. Sounds great. My next question is more on our side. Are all the MOAs have been released? Because I don't think I've seen one here for us here at the city of Concord.
Okay. City of Concord. So
Yes. So it is in DocuSign. It may have already been signed. I think I spoke with you, Will. Let me just double check while we're online here and I'll let you know.
Okay, at least hold me to that for you. Well, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. So again, this is probably one of your most important paragraphs. Most people have questions. It's a good question. How do I get paid? Well, it's in the MOA here in this paragraph G on page 6 of 17. So I go ahead and highlight this file where you would make sure that you understand these provisions. Probably the most important thing you got. Here's the funds management discussion that Carl had mentioned earlier. So that's in here as well. And again, what we're looking for here is just a way for you to report on the revenues and expenditures associated with the grant. We're trying to avoid commingling of funds where it causes any kind of confusion. So that's what this is for. Again, taxes, I mentioned this already. Y'all as local government entity may be eligible for a refund of any sales tax that you pay, right? Sales and use taxes. You can pretty much file that with NCDOR at the end of every year. I think you can tell it to a refund check of any sales or use taxes that you pay. But you still got to pay them, up front, and you get refunded for them. We certainly encourage you to keep doing that. However, we are not able to reimburse you for any taxes paid. This is a common confusing thing because people get an invoice, it has the taxes on there already. They say, hey, just pay, we want to reimburse this entire invoice. They don't take the taxes off that when they submit it to us. We cannot pay those taxes. It's a requirement under law that we can't do it, but also it's kind of a common sense requirement too, because think about it. If y'all have an invoice with sales tax on it, right? Yeah, you have to pay it. And if we were to reimburse that, then you go around at the end of the year, file with NCDOR for a refund of that sales tax. You just double dipped, right? Because we reimburse you for sales tax and you got it refunded. And I've actually seen that happen in some cases where we inadvertently paid sales tax and got caught during the audit. That caused all kinds of problems. So this is as much just to protect yourself as well as us, but we cannot pay those sales taxes. Please go ahead and get a refund at the end of the year. Do your normal process of that. We can't pay them with this grant. That's basically what this paragraph says.
So Will, if you don't mind, I don't know, can you hear me, Will?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead and drop your email in the chat again, and I'll send you a copy of that MOA. It has been fully executed by your parties assigned.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'll be helpful as we go through the MOA too for him to have a copy of it. So appreciate you doing that. All right, documentation you required in your grant file. There's an attachment, attachment 3, but this is basically what you're required to keep in your. You can keep more, but it's the minimum requirements in your grant file. You have to keep it for a 3-year period. from the date, the minimum 3-year period from the date the grant is closed. For federal grants, for state grants, it's 5 years. For federal grants, it's 3 years. Again, you can keep it, encourage you to keep it longer than that, but, you know, certainly scan the records in and keep it forever, but, the minimum is 3 years. There's all the stuff you have to have in your grant file. Property and equipment. This is, again, paragraph J here. This can get confusing. So we've kind of laid out all these rules for you, here in paragraph J. If you're buying equipment, any kind of, you know, tangible items, property, equipment, whatever you want to call it, with federal grant funds, okay? Because this is a DHS FEMA federal grant, only allowed to buy equipment listed in the AEL. Okay, so if you click on this AEL, it's a big jumbled mess of a bunch of different pages you got to go to and look up what you're trying to buy. You'll get an AEL number. You have to buy something on the AEL list. It's not a vendor list. It's just like a type of equipment list. You know, software as a service. There'll be an AEL number for it, right? So you have to have an AEL to buy it. And then once you do buy that item, okay, it's yours. It's titled in your name. You have an obligation to maintain it, you know, like you do any other property or equipment. You also have an obligation to inventory it, right? So that we can say at any time during a period of performance of grant, hey, let me see that item. Let me see your inventory records for that item you purchased with grant funds. The auditors might do that. So you have to keep it inventory. You have to keep it maintained. If it is, if it has a fair market value of less than $5,000, or, okay, if you have stricter guidelines for inventorying, right? So say your local policy is you have to inventory anything over $2,000. Whatever the strictest requirement is, then it must be inventory. If it's underneath that amount, you don't have to inventory it, but it's over that amount, you have to inventory it. So the federal guidelines are $5,000. You might have your own stricter policies that require inventory of the item. When I say inventory of the item, it means in a system of record, you know, we have an inventory number associated with it, and we can identify that record with its location with the inventory number. So again, depending on the value of it, that's a requirement. And then, of course, you can use the equipment as intended for the purpose that you bought it for. But when you go to get rid of that item, okay, it may not really be a big deal for kind of software, right? That's, but this is more for kind of tangible items. But if you go to get rid of something, okay, you have to maintain the fair market value of the item in your financial systems of record. So once the fair market value of the item is depreciated to a value less than $5,000 or less than $5,000, I'm sorry, less than $5,000, then pretty much you can dispose of the item. You're supposed to let us know about it, but FEMA has no interest in that item anymore. You can dispose of it and keep the proceeds for yourself, do whatever you want with it. But if you try to dispose of an item that has a fair market value of $5,000 or greater, you have to let us know about it. We have to let FEMA know about it. The FEMA retains an interest in that item. They may request to be provided compensation if you dispose of that item at that time. So if it's $5,000 or more, FEMA retains an interest in it. If it's less than $5,000, FEMA does not retain an interest in it. So what's this mean in practical terms? What I advise people to do is make sure you keep good depreciation records. Most folks use a system called Munis. They have a different financial system. We use NCAS for the state. Most municipalities use Munis. But you should have depreciation records for items that are required to be inventoried. And once that depreciation value, the fair market value is less than $5,000, dispose of it, do whatever you want with it. If you try to dispose of it with a $5,000 or greater fair market value, it causes more complications. So that's kind of my advice to you. Wait till the fair market value is less than $5,000. Again, you can take entire classes on this stuff. I'm trying to give you the Cliff Notes version in a few minutes here, but that's the basic gist of equipment. Additionally, for certain communications equipment, we have a communications memo in attachment 4. So certain types of comms equipment needs to be interoperable with some standards that we've identified at the state level. So read attachment 4 if you're purchasing comms equipment, make sure it's eligible. And that's pretty much it for equipment. Conflicts of interest. We already talked about this a little bit. You have to have a conflict of interest policy. We have to have that policy on file before we can give you any grant funds. This goes into a little more about all the various conflict of interest. I mean, in a nutshell, a lot of this is common sense with conflict of interest, but you want to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. So if you got a county commissioner that has a business, right? And you're using federal grant funds to buy something. If you buy it from that county commissioner's business, how does that look? Right? That at least creates an appearance of a conflict of interest because county commissioner is in a position of authority with your organization. He's also getting business through his private business from federal grant funds, right? So that could create at least the appearance of not an actual conflict of interest. So as a common sense, kind of mechanism, avoid those situations. When in doubt, bid it out, right? When you're purchasing with federal funds, go ahead and use full competition. But please avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. It's going to cause headaches for the grant. It's going to cause headaches for y'all politically and otherwise. In a nutshell, that's what this thing says. There's all that. EHP, Lisa covered this already, but here's the website for EHP. And we have a little more in paragraph 14 below about that. And that's only if you're doing any kind of construction renovation activities, which are defined very broadly. Again, nailing something in a wall, disturbing even a teaspoonful of dirt, and everything in between. That could be considered construction renovation requiring EHP. Standard terms and conditions. There's a link here for that. Just talks about making sure you comply with all that. A bunch of legal stuff there. Closeout reporting requirements. This is important. Paragraph R. Okay. So again, when the grant is done, right? When you've spent all your money or you spent all the money you're going to be able to spend, you get close to that end of the period of performance, you want to go ahead and close your grant out. Okay. Now, absolute last date you can close your grant out, it must be within 90 calendar days after the end of the period of performance. So all your funds have to be expended during the period of performance. In this case, by 2/28/26, unless there's a grant extension, POP extension. But for most part, in this case, your funds must be expended between December 1st, 22 and 2/28/26. But then you have 90 calendar days after the POP to close out your grant. Okay. And by closing out your grant, this is what you have to do. Submit all this documentation to us within those 90 days. So it could be the accounting of how all grant funds were used. Again, this gets back to that question Carl raised about your accounting records, right? You need to make sure that all the revenues and expenditures were accounted for, what the accounting of the funds, certification letter, saying the funds were used for the purpose appropriated, a letter saying that these proof scope of work, what you said you were going to do, it's a contract, right? You said you're going to complete XYZ project, you're certifying that project is complete, and any other documentation that we would request on an as-needed basis. Of course, you have to be current on all your annual reports, your NCSR, your cyber hygiene, right? If you have any kind of audit findings, they have to be, with respect to the grant, they have to be resolved before we close the grant out. And then once all that is complete, okay, we review it. We may do a site visit, or we may not. Quite frankly, we're not staffed to do a whole lot of site visits right now, but we can always do one. It's always a possibility. But once that's all complete, we will then go ahead and issue you that letter I was talking about, basically saying that, hey, we're closing the grant. This is your letter saying close grant. Please keep it in your grant files. Okay, that's your receipt that it's all closed. This paragraph here is very important, and you must close that grant out no later than 90 calendar days after the end of the POP. If you do not, you're violating these provisions under federal law. We have a compliance issue. Any questions about closeout or anything else we discussed? All right. So again, that entire paragraph 9, please read that and understand those provisions in your value management of the grant. Moving on to the rest of the MOA, we've already talked about taxes. Probably bears repeating again here. We don't pay taxes on this grant. Financial reporting requirements and audit requirements. This can cause some questions on the compliance side. Basically, there's some various state law provisions that require level 1 to 3 financial reports if you receive grant funds from or through state agencies. Those requirements do not apply to local government entities in the state of North Carolina. Okay, so You're not required to comply with these level 1 to 3 reporting requirements. All of your financial reporting is done through the LGC because you're a local government entity. That's what basically this says. For audits, again, if you're subject to the LGC, Local Government Commission in the state of North Carolina, which you pretty much have to be to receive this grant, okay, you will have audit requirements through the LGC. All right, pretty much you'll be doing an annual audit. You have to self-audit once a year, and you will have to complete those requirements. Now, we will review, we as NCDPS internal audit will review those audits that you do every year. If there's any findings that relate to the grant funds that we administer, right, in this case, SLCGP, right? So if there was an audit finding, God forbid, related to SLCGP on your annual audit, we would then be in contact with you to do corrective actions to fix that item. Okay, and that all that must be taken care of and completed before we can close the grant out. And depending how severe the finding is, it may also inhibit our ability to actually reimburse funds to you. It may require recoupment of certain funds. Okay, for example, it has happened with this grant. This is a new grant, but I have other grants where this did happen. I mentioned this already. We had a situation where, unfortunately, a grantee was reimbursed inadvertently sales taxes on some equipment that he purchased. They purchased some generators under a different grant program. They were reimbursed sales taxes under that grant program. We didn't catch it. We paid it. However, the auditors that did their annual audit caught it. And in that particular case, not only did we reimburse them for the taxes, that entity had already filed for the refund of their tax with NCDOR. They actually went ahead and doubled it. We reimbursed them and they filed for a refund of those taxes. That caused a lot of problems and serious audit findings that had to be corrected. Okay, because that's a lack of internal controls on a number of levels. Number one, you're not supposed to be submitting requests for reimbursement that include taxes, and that subrecipient in that case did that. Right, that's a failure of internal control. Number two, not only did they do that, they went ahead and filed for a refund of those taxes that we already paid them for with NCDOR. Again, another lack of internal controls on the financial side. That created a huge problem. That's an example of an audit finding that would have to be corrected if that were, God forbid, to happen to you. That's basically what this paragraph talks about. There's some federal requirements that if you get $750,000 or more in funding from all federal sources, you also have to submit your audit to the audit clearinghouse, which is on here. And also, we ask you to please submit copies of your audits to DPS internal audit as well. That's on here as well. So that's pretty much it for audits. All right, any questions about reporting our audits? All right, if you're doing any kind of construction or renovation or infrastructure projects, not only does EHP matter, paragraph 14 here, but there's also written approval required from FEMA prior to doing it. So EHP, written approval required from FEMA. There are also some other federal provisions that apply. Davis-Bacon Act applies, and the BABA, Build America, Buy America Act applies. These are additional complexities if you're trying to do construction and renovation activities with federal grant funding, including SLCGP. Davis-Bacon in particular, this can be a headache. Basically jacks up the cost of the project because you have to make sure you are paying certain minimum federal wage threshold determinations. You're regularly certain minimum federal wage levels to the folks involved in that construction to deal with the Department of Labor requirement. Can cause huge headaches and jack up the cost of projects using federal funds. Build America, Buy America. This is basically just saying you have to use U.S. manufactured steel and manufactured construction materials in your projects. But there's so many waivers to this, you're probably get around it with SLCGP if it did apply. But Davis-Bacon's a little bit hard not to crack if you're doing construction. So my advice, if you can at all avoid it, don't do construction renovation projects with this money. But if you have to do it, we'll work with you and try to get the appropriate documentation in place. Other than that, this is all pretty much boilerplate stuff. There's a bunch of civil rights stuff in here in paragraph 24. Because this is federal funding, certain federal civil rights laws apply. The minute you spend a federal dollar, then all these federal civil rights provisions kick in. Right? If you were just spending your own private money with any kind of federal involvement, these laws would not apply. But once you start spending that federal dollar, and there's also state requirements as well, but in this case, it's federal money, then all these various federal laws would kick in and apply. Yeah, there's a lot of them, right? Because there's a lot of different protected classes under the civil rights laws. However, the bottom line, what all this is saying is don't discriminate in the application of these funds, okay? Don't discriminate against a protected class. Don't discriminate based on age, race, gender, sex, religion, ethnicity. There's all these various protected classes. Do not discriminate based on any of those classes with these federal funds. That's the gist of what this is saying. So it's pretty much common sense stuff at this point, but these are all the laws that apply. Again, this is just more boilerplate stuff. Big thing here, paragraph 35 compliance. You know, if you don't comply with all the rules, this is the nasty stuff that can happen to you. Please don't put us in a position to do this. It has happened before with some subrecipients. It is by far the exception. Large majority, 99% of our subrecipients are excellent subrecipients. We have no problems. But there is always a bad apple or two in the bunch to get in some trouble. This spells out what can happen if you don't comply with all the rules and regulations. These are the attachments. This is kind of important in paragraph 37. This is the attachments that will be attached to your MOA, including most importantly, that scope of work that we talked about, attachment 1. That's your approved project. This is your annual progress report form, attachment 2. Your required documentation is 3, and so forth. So this is important. These are all incorporated by reference into the MOA. Then you got your signature page. And for signature page, you probably know this already, but you're required to have at least one signature on y'all's behalf, and it has to be your finance person. That's required. You can have 2 more signatures if you want, whoever you want for the organization, but 1 signature is required to be your finance person. For us, our director Ray signs, as well as our legal attorney signs. And then you all have up to 3 signatures for you. And that is a 17-page MOA in a nutshell. Any questions about the MOA? Right?
I got one.
Yep.
I didn't realize I was supposed to have my finance person sign mine. I
Yep.
signed ours.
Okay.
And it's been, I don't know like where it went after that, you know, like I sign in and it takes it out of my inbox. Do I need to like ask for it back or something like that?
Oh, Conrad, what agency are you with again? I'm sorry.
Town of Apex.
Yeah, we can look that up for you and get back with you on that. Your direct grants manager is Michelle Strong. And she is in another classroom right now, but as soon as she comes back, I'll pass this along to her and explain that you need that MOA sent back through. Not an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm?
And the reason that finance person is required is because we're talking about money here, right? So it's required the finance person signs. And it really, by doing that, it really helps you as well because it promotes better communication, coordination with your finance and the folks that are managing the grant.
Well, Conrad, if you don't mind, go ahead and drop your email in the chat for me, and I'm going to initiate an email conversation between you and Michelle so you can pick up with her when we leave this meeting.
Got it. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Hey,
So-
Garrett, one quick question. This is Kevin, sorry. We skipped over paragraph 7, the supplementation.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Paragraph, again, since this has a period of performance prior to the MOA, and we can go back and pick up things that were purchased prior to the date of the MOA, is paragraph 7 that big of a deal?
Yeah. I skipped over because it's such a hassle to discuss.
Sorry.
Let's get into this supplementation. So first of all, let me say this language was pretty much cut and pasted from FEMA. So we have to put this in all of our MOAs.
And let me just say that Janine and I would like to go to lunch sometime today, so. Nah.
It's not gonna be that long, but no, we have to put this language in the MOA. It's required by FEMA. So it's cut and pasted from that. It's exactly what they said. We have to tell y'all. It's not something that we actively enforce, but it is in here just in case. Again, it's one of these CYA things, right? Something were to come up. We can say, look, we warned y'all, it's in the MOA, you signed it, right? So that's why it's in here. But basically, what this is really designed to do is to say, It's really for kind of salary, because salary can be an authorized expenditure in certain grants, where if you already have salary appropriated for a certain position, right? It's already appropriate, it's already being paid through your county or, local government funds. And then you get a federal grant. And all of a sudden you say, okay, I want to use my federal grant money to pay this person's salary, right? And you take that state money, it's already appropriate for that salary, and use it for something else. You can't do that, okay? What you can do is use the federal funds to create and fund a new position, right? To build new capacity, but you can't use it to supplant funds you already have for that person's salary. So you can use it to fund a new position, and you continue to fund that new position, right? Using that federal grant, you can do that, but you can't replace the person's salary used for something else. That's really what this is designed for, okay? Where it gets confusing is when you talk about equipment, and sometimes services as well. With this being a reimbursement grant in particular, it's hard because you have to buy the item or purchase that service first and then get reimbursed for it, right? So it could cause some confusion there as well. We understand that, we get it. What it's kind of trying to say is, yes, you can go ahead and certainly buy the item, you have to do it. In this case, you can buy them all the way back to December 1st, 2022. But, ideally you would have some kind of like temporary fund, where you would go ahead and pay for those items with and get reimbursed for. And you would not be supplanting already appropriated monies to buy that equipment, right? So something that was kind of already in your budget, already had funding for it, and you're spending with federal funds. That's kind of what this is trying to say. Very hard to enforce in real life. Much easier to enforce with respect to salary than equipment and services. So take that as you will, do the best you can with it. I don't think it's going to be a problem, especially with that period of performance going back to December 1st, 2022, if you're talking about equipment. That's kind of what this is designed for. Hopefully I answered your question as best I could.
Yep, thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on here I'm not going to go over the award letter. You already received that, so I'm not going to cover that. But one thing that you will be getting is a cost report from us to submit with your request of reimbursements. And this is the cost report memo that we send over. Get a cost report established for y'all, and you'll be. When do we provide the cost reports, Lisa? I've already done that, or we're getting ready to provide the cost reports?
So we'll be providing the cost reports as soon as our DPS fiscal team is able to set up the cost report payments, or the cost report themselves in Emma. Our system right now is currently being reworked for that. So we have some staff that's working on updating those. If you are familiar with our cost reports for Homeland Security grants, they're going to be set up very similar. However, you will see the federal funds and the state fund breakout. It won't matter how you fill out your cost report. We will more than likely on our grant team side, take the state funds first to ensure that we're meeting our match requirement for the federal grant. So we can definitely step through filling out a cost report process at a later time. We will flush that information through the SLCGP team, and the meetings will post potential webinars to fill out cost reports on our website. We will be providing additional training for those cost reports. In the meantime, should you have a cost report available before we actually get to that point where we're, advertising online that we'll be holding webinars for that purpose, feel free to reach out to me, Derek, Janine Childs is also on here. And if you know your specific grants manager, go ahead and reach out directly to them, because they're going to have firsthand knowledge of your cost reports available and ready at this time. I can tell you it's still probably going to be a few weeks out. Yep. Before this actually happens. We have the material on the grant team to set them up. However, like I said, our fiscal team is not prepared at this point. So do allow a little bit more time there, and we will we'll get those to you as soon as we can.
So the reason I'm showing you this here is because this is what we do to establish a cost report for y'all. And it goes to our DPS controller's office to produce that document. And it's not hard to fill out a cost report. This is kind of what's going to be on it when you see it. But basically the key is you have an awarded amount, in this case, $99,650 for this particular award. And then it's gonna be broken down by POETI, planning, organization, equipment, training, exercises, right? POETI. And this is the budget categories upon which you can spend. In this particular case, it was based on the budget that was submitted by this subrecipient. They said they wanted $700 for planning, 87 for equipment, and 5,000 for training. So then, when you submit your request for reimbursement, you have to go ahead and spend down based on these categories, right? Up to the maximum amount of the award of $650. That's the gist of what the POETI means. And basically, you'll be submitting an amount, could be the entire amount at one time, could be lesser amount than $99,650. You spend it down based on the POETI categories, you write it on the form. There will be a specified federal share and state share as applicable. We fill that out. And then basically attach this form to your request for reimbursement and you get paid. The reason it's taking us a little while right now is we have these things called cost centers that we pay the money on based on our state accounting system called NCAS. NCAS for the state has now become NCFS. We've transitioned to an entirely new accounting system. So all these old NCAS cost centers have to transition to NCFS cost centers, which is causing delay in the production of the cost reports. We will get the actual cost reports to you soon, but it'll look something kind of based on the information in this cost report memo. They're easy to fill out. You'll include that with your request for reimbursement. That's the gist of it. So I want to show that to you here today. Any questions about that? All right. That's all the documents that I have. And if I can get back to the actual. Okay. That is the end of our presentation today. Now we have our friendly Al asking if it's time for questions. All right, any questions that we have already addressed? All right. As I said, I appreciate y'all. Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Will over at City of Concord. I think you already mentioned it, but I just wanted to double check for the fiscal year 2023 SLCGP.
Yes.
Is you're thinking that's going to be in December?
Yes, sir.
The application.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that website, our website. If you just Google NCM SLCGP, the website I showed you earlier, that will have the information on it there. That will have the actual 23 application form and all the information about how to apply for it. It'll be an Adobe PDF form. Most likely you'll fill that out, send it to that email address. It'll be in December. We'll give you at least 30 days to complete it. When exactly in December, I can't say. It depends when we actually get our award from FEMA. But once we get that award, we'll post our subrecipient applications. You'll have 30 days to apply. And it'll be kind of the same process that was last year. So please stay tuned on that website. I'm going to look for more information for the 23 program. Now we do encourage y'all to apply for 23 program. There's a lot more money on the table in 23. So I think you're going to be satisfied and pleased that we're going to actually have higher project limits in 23. So we had $100,000 limitation for 22 money. We're going to at least double that in 23. So you'll be able to fund larger projects if you compete for the funding. I think Eileen, Eileen, I think you have a question as well, or two questions, Eileen.
Yeah, so I posted the question. Can you describe what would exercises would be? I
Sure.
wasn't sure when I formed, but I put some money in for it.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So exercises, if you've ever been part of the cybersecurity exercise, it's where y'all can get together, you can simulate, an attack. You bring various multidisciplinary entities in and game it out basically, right? That's an exercise. What we're saying is if you use federal money to fund that exercise, it's in the MOA. There's something called HC, which basically says you have to have an after action report. You're going to be required to maintain a roster of participants in the exercise. You have to have an after action report kind of summarizing the results of the exercise. And that's what that link for HC is. So if you're going to get funded for an exercise, which you did in your case, you have to submit a roster and an after action report along with your costs to get reimbursed for that exercise. That's the gist of it.
Okay, so when I put exercises down, I said rollout of products and maintenance of products. Okay,
yeah, that's probably not an exercise. Yeah, unless you're gonna exercise. Are you planning to game that out somehow, or or is that really just training you're talking about?
Could you say that again? I didn't get it.
So Yeah, so what you mentioned there, are you talking really just training how to use those products? Or are you talking about like having a formal exercise, we're gonna go ahead and test that, those items and products?
Well, it's, endpoint protection, so pretty
Yeah.
much it's getting tested every day.
Right,
So it's
yeah,
those products. Out.
yeah. So if you're talking about training people how to use that, then that would be training, not an exercise.
Okay, but as far as the monitoring and maintaining of that, is that not an
Yeah.
exercise?
No, that would not be an exercise. Exercise is a discrete activity, right? It's just a discrete event. It's not a continual process.
And you'll want to make sure that you use the HESIP, the Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation Tool.
Yeah, but she's not doing exercise.
Yeah, I mean, that's another distinguishing factor is what I should say.
You're basically buying a software, a service, a software, right? And
Yes.
that's equipment, right? So you're purchasing that, and then if you're training people how to use that, that would be training. If you're going to try to somehow do an exercise where you simulated an attack, instant you had to respond to a discrete event, that would be an exercise. So you probably more have equipment and training. Yeah.
The money was rewarded sizes that cannot be used, or how do I do that?
Yeah, so what you're gonna have to do is that's gonna require a request for an amendment, right? A budget amendment. And who are you with again, Eileen? You're with Southport, right?
It's Southport, right?
Yep, yes. So who's her grant manager?
Janina Brown.
Oh, she's right here. Okay. You have to contact Janine Childs. You can send it to the SLCGP inbox if you want. Janine will get it and just request a minor scope and budget modification to recharacterize those exercise funds to something else, whether it's equipment or training, probably what it needs to be in your case.
And Janine's actually dropping her contact information into the chat there for you.
Great. All right. I appreciate the help today. Thank you.
Yep. No problem.
And I realize we have some more questions here, Derek.
Yep.
But I was just going to say, if you don't know who your grant manager is, feel free to ask that question in the SLCGP inbox as well. But I can basically tell you that Janine and her partner, Brad Garrett, manage the eastern part of the state. Michelle Strong manages the central branch counties of the state. And I manage the western part of the state. And that information is also, I believe, available on our website. We have a map listed there, possibly,
No,
not
we're
yet.
working on the
Okay.
map. We're working on it.
Well, we're working on it. So if you have any questions, about who your grant manager is, you can send it.
We'll take care of it there. Yeah. All right. Do we have any other questions today? Conrad, was that a previous question you had, sir? You had your hand still up, or is that a new question?
It's a new one. I
Okay.
just wanted to ask where I can find the recordings for this.
Yep, good question. So all the recordings we have available are on our SLCGP website. So we're still a little behind on getting all our recordings posted. We've had various webinars, but some of them are up on the SLCGP website. I'm going to share my screen real quick and show you one of them in particular that would be valuable for you. Give me 1 second here. So part of the problem is we have to convert these things to a YouTube video before we can post them on our website, and it takes some time. So we're just a little bit behind the ball in posting some of our videos, but I'll show you one that's really good. So, all right, so let's see where this is.
It's actually under the application portion, I believe, Derek. There's some reason how it somehow ended up there.
Yeah, I think a little confusion on this. Let me see where that thing was. Yeah, this is it right here. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So this, it's under, I'm not sure why it's under application procedures, but this FY22 SLCGP substitute information session, this is one that was about an hour long, and we reviewed the SLCGP awardee quick guide, which is this document right here, which kind of summarized everything we covered today in what, a 1-2 page document? One page document. And we discussed that in that particular webinar. So I will go to the link for that and watch that one. And we'll try to get these other ones up on the website as well.
Do you mind opening the awardee guide real quick? There's just one thing I do want to cover. So you guys submitted 5 documents for the 2022 award. For those that'll be applying for 2023, if you're brand new to the grant, you will have to submit those 5 documents. So this awardee quick guide should still work when it comes time for those 23 applications, if you want to go ahead in advance and prepare your 5 documents. One thing I do want to say is we discussed the naming convention here about how to submit those 5 documents. It's very important that you put your agency name first and then the title of the document. So let's say ABC County and state sub W9, right? Agency name electronic vendor form, agency name overdue tax statement, agency name conflict of interest, and agency name in your procurement policy. So that's the way we structured the naming convention for those 5 compliance documents. And that's because these 5 documents actually go to different divisions within our agency. It's not just your grant team that collects these. We have to get those electronic vendor forms over so that they can establish your payment. So that's why you'll see that naming convention here. Now that you are an awardee and your MOA is signed, please also be very specific about the documents you are submitting. So if you're submitting a reimbursement request, your cost report, name your agency, the grant year, FY22 SLCGP, cost report number 1. Even if it's the full amount, and if it's your first cost report, name it cost report number 1. The reason it's important to name your agency and the grant year, we're getting ready to move into FY23. So if you're fortunate enough to be awarded 2 years in a row, we want to know which cost report you're sending in. We don't want to get those mixed up for which grant year. So just a quick note on that awardee quick guide.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And it's, sometimes we get documents that are emailed to us that's just scan 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? What does that mean? It takes a lot more work to try to figure that out and really delays processing of those documents. So that's just to trying to follow some common sense naming convention, need some documents to us. But anyway, long answer to your question there, sir, but essentially the videos as we have them, we post on our website. And the awardee quick guide is there as well. All right. And John, what's your question, sir?
Will you be posting the PowerPoints from yesterday and today?
Yeah. PowerPoints, we're gonna get those as well. Yep, we'll get those on the website as well. Appreciate your reminding us to do that. Jean's taking note of it right now. We'll get those up on the website as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Eileen, did you have another question or is that an old hand?
It's an old hand, but I can't find Janine's contact info. Where
Oh,
is that?
okay.
Oh, I just popped it into the chat.
The last thing I see is John's question.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see it in there either. I think,
Put it in. Okay, I'll pop it in again.
Thank you for that reminder. We'll get
It's at
that in there for you.
11:17.
it's not on my side either, Janine.
Okay.
I saw you do it, but I don't see it here. Maybe you put it in an older meeting.
Mm. Mhm.
There's
Okay.
Lisa's
Got it.
information right there. Jean will get hers in there for you. All right, thanks for that. I mean, we'll get that call for you.
Thank you.
All right. Yep. All right. We got plenty of time left, folks. If there's any other questions, we've got a good half hour left, but we'll certainly give you half an hour back your day as well if you have no more questions.
I'm gonna put in our other 2 grants managers that aren't with us. I'm putting in their contact information as well. And Conrad, just so you know, I did get that email out to you and Michelle to make contact with one another.
Thank you.
Lisa, can you put Janine's in, please?
I don't know why my stuff's not showing up. I'm sorry, everyone. What's going on?
Derek, are you seeing what we're typing into the chat on our side?
See, here's that. See your name. I'll post your names.
I'm putting it right now.
Oh, what happened?
All right, can everybody see the grant team email contacts in the message in the chat now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. All right, Eileen, I think you still have your hand up there, so I assume that answers your question. Were there any other questions? Like I said, we have plenty of time left. We're here to answer your questions. If not, we'll We'll give you half hour back to you, gang. All right, well, thank y'all for joining us, folks. This was a very productive session. We will try to get these videos and PowerPoints posted, as we said. We'll follow up with the individual questions as we discussed. And thank you for your time. We look forward to working with y'all on the SLCGP, and if you have CBCG grant programs, as well as any other grant programs you have with us. And we also look forward to you applying for the 23 SLCGP. Thank you, folks. Have a good day.
Great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll stop the recording at this time.